Hey everyone, how's it going? Xbox and Microsoft just finished its game showcase for 2022, and among all the titles they showed to me, there was one that stood out above the crowd. That game is Starfield. I've quietly had my eye on this game since last year's E3 trailer, and this year my excitement for the game skyrocketed. This is the most detailed look we've had at the game since it was announced in 2018. In fact, it's the only real look we've had at the game so far. After watching this new trailer, I've gotta say I'm impressed with what Bethesda is going for here. Todd Howard of Bethesda has described the game as Skyrim in space, and while that might be all it is, I also see a ton of influence from games like No Man's Sky and Destiny, and all of the classic science fiction movies from 2001: A Space Odyssey to Star Wars. Starfield looks like it could be incredible, but at the same time, myself and a ton of others are a little worried about this one. So in this video, I'll be breaking down everything that's been officially confirmed about the game so far, discuss what I like and dislike so far, and we'll see if we can figure out just what exactly this game even is. Let's start with the positives. The first thing that's immediately obvious from the second you watch any of the trailers is the graphics, art style, and sound design. This game pays a lot of homage to the sci-fi classics of the past and is most obvious in the soundtrack. The soundtrack sounds inspired by the likes of John Williams, who did the soundtrack for Star Wars and E.T. among others, and the main composer for this game, Inon Zur, worked as a composer for several Star Trek games in the early 2000s. Needless to say, it sounds authentic. The main theme we hear throughout the trailers is hopeful, mysterious, and uplifting all at the same time. Despite wearing its influences on its sleeve, the soundtrack sounds distinctly unique. The main theme is instantly recognizable while setting a clear sci-fi atmosphere. It's hard to predict the future, but from what I've heard so far, I wouldn't be shocked to hear this soundtrack win some awards next year. The graphics are also first class, though it's clear from the trailer that some work still needs to be done in certain areas. The art style makes all the different planets, locations, and aliens seen in the trailer super interesting. There's so many unique and different environments across the galaxy that I can't wait to explore. None of the different planets shown look identical, yet clearly all belong to the same game. Every shot in these trailers looks like a postcard. So many vast open landscapes that could be filled with anything. Since this is an RPG made by Bethesda, it's expected there's going to be a heavy emphasis on character customization. From the look of things so far, they're meeting that expectation and then some. The character customization looks excellent. I can't wait to spend 3 hours customizing a character before even starting the game, just to play the entire game in first person anyway, and then another 3 hours customizing my spaceship, which is a thing you can do, and my inner 6-year-old child is very excited about that. There's tons of traits you can use to define your playstyle, which should add a lot of replayability into the game and make everyone's playthrough a little different. Then once the game gets going, you can specialize your character even more. There's a skill tree for leveling up and a challenge system to improve those skills even further. The systems surrounding resource management are a little vague at the moment, but it should be an interesting aspect of the game if implemented well. Being able to build an outpost and create a business to harvest resources is an interesting idea on paper, but might border on too much to manage, especially when you could do the same thing for your spaceship. I'm a little concerned the game could become more resource management than fun science fiction, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. Speaking of spaceships, you can use them to fly to over 100 different star systems and 1,000 different planets across the entire game, all of which are allegedly fully explorable. On paper, this seems too good to be true, and I'm a little worried that it is. I have my doubts that we'll be able to explore every square foot of each and every planet in the game. Being able to load all of that on a console would be a technical marvel to say the least, and it might be why the game isn't releasing on the last generation of consoles, instead opting to stay exclusive to the Xbox Series S and X as well as PC. This claim reminds me a bit too much of No Man's Sky, and we all know how that turned out, at least at launch. And that segues nicely into what has me worried about the game. The biggest concern I have for Starfield is that I simply don't know what it is. I know it's an RPG a la Skyrim, but as far as I'm aware, there's no stated end goal for Starfield. The story hasn't been detailed thus far. There's some background information of the world on the game's Wikipedia, but nothing explaining who anyone in the game is, what their goals are, their motivation, beliefs, personalities, or anything like that. You can be who you want and do what you want, but what's the end goal? Is there an end goal? I'd really like to see more of what the story of Starfield is, because if I can't get hooked on a good story and good characters, it's going to be really hard for me to enjoy the game. Hopefully we get a look at the narrative in a future trailer, because otherwise this is going to be a tough sell for me personally. The other issue myself and a lot of others are seeing in this new trailer is the combat. Now, the space combat looks great. The ship's movements all have a gravity to it. It looks super realistic, though at times it might be disorienting in the first-person view, since all the movements feel like the vehicle is fishtailing. As for the boots on the ground combat, well, it could be worse. The shooting looks extremely basic. It looks like a video game straight out of the early 2000s. There's some modern influences there for sure. The weapon wheel and the double barrel shotgun shown are obviously inspired by the new Doom games, but everything else looks as generic as it could be. If the combat and shooting mechanics rise to the level of mediocrity, it will have surpassed expectations. Granted, there's still plenty of time before release for the combat to improve, but the fact that it looks like that now is concerning. The last issue I see with the trailers are some animations. For as great as the game can look, it does have a lot of areas that don't look finished. The most obviously is the dust being kicked up by the landing spaceships. That clearly isn't launch ready, but there's still plenty of time for that to be improved. I expect all of this to look good when the game releases. There is of course the plethora of glitches that crop up every time Bethesda releases a new game, and I wouldn't be shocked to see that happen here too. If you've heard of or played a Bethesda game, this is just something you expect now, though I have to wonder if players will accept a buggy launch given that standards have risen a lot in the past several years. As a whole, I'm really looking forward to Starfield, even though I can't say for certain what it is. Given Bethesda's history with buggy launches and the unknowns about the game, I'm not sure if this is what I'm going to end up pre-ordering. With a Dead Space remake and a new Resident Evil 4 remake coming out in the same time frame, I'm already going to be pretty busy with new releases at the start of 2023, but if we get some more info on the storyline and noticeable improvements made to the combat, I will absolutely make time for this one, and you'll probably see it on the channel if that happens. Well, those are just my thoughts. Of course, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.